This is Kevin and Jake, and our next Sage session. I think this is number 9 at this point, and today talking about some of the illusions that coincide with a blog. Hold on, let me turn off my. Let me turn off my. How do I mute that? There we go. Okay. This comes off of a blog, which we don't always mention that. If somebody wants to connect, go subscribe to the blog, where do they go? How do they find you?
Yeah, hi everybody. Nice to be with you today. I write an article usually every Sunday. It's on Substack. So if you were to search for Substack Jake Eagle, you would find it. The title of it ongoing is The Unorthodox Therapist. So you could also search for The Unorthodox Therapist. And then you'd find these weekly articles that are all about SAGE and trying to help people understand what it is.
So this topic today is based off of the blog that came out, what, just 2 days ago, right? Sunday, September 21.
Right, right.
Okay. I am in the chat. I'll say hello. All right. There's a hello from me. I'll look for somebody to respond there in the chat. Just tell us that you can see and hear us, and then we will get started. I see people are watching it, so waiting for you to say you see and hear us both. Jake, say hi again so they can check your audio.
Hello again, everyone. I'm looking to see. I guess I don't really see the chat because I'm not looking at YouTube.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I've got it. I know there's about
Anybody out there
there we
respond?
go. Yep.
Great. Okay.
Hi. And Ralph, Fiona, Ralph, Judy can see and hear us. Great. Great. Thank you guys for being there.
Yeah.
Jake, and you also mentioned this topic. Do you remember what the title of the blog was?
I don't remember. I think it was something like Why Therapy Fails.
Okay. And
Yeah.
you said it had like 50% more opens
Huge,
than normal.
huge viewership compared to most. And I don't know if that's because of the topic or if somebody retweeted it, but there seemed to be a lot of interest in this. And I think in a way it gets to the heart of what we've been trying to do with SAGE since we started working with Kevin. One of the things is we're really trying to help people understand if you've been going to therapy or you have loved ones that are going to therapy for a long period of time and not getting the results, there's a reason why. And without delving into too much detail about it, most therapy is operating at what we're referring to as OS2. It's a level of consciousness where we frame the world in a way that strips us of our personal agency. It strips us of our inner security and power. It's not the intention. The intention in terms of OS2 is positive. It's to help ourselves feel certain and secure. And when we go to therapists, their intention is good. But the basic frame has got some very profound flaws. And we're trying to offer an alternative if you step into the SAGE orientation, which we call OS3, Operating System 3. So in the article, one of the things I did is I talked about there are certain illusions that we all live within, and they are very active in most therapy. And when you step into the world of SAGE, those are stripped away. They're no longer available as crutches or methods for enabling people. And so Kevin and I thought we would talk about those today. And by the way, Hannah's not here. She had to drive about an hour south to Kona for something. So she's sorry to miss people, and she'll join us again next time. But for today, I thought unless you want to start anywhere else, Kevin, I thought we might talk about some of the things that get stripped away.
Yeah, and Ralph posted the title. Thank you, Ralph. The therapy trap: why we stay stuck. And I do want to mention that the way that Jake and I met is through an agency that contacted me for my podcast, which is today the Kevin Miller podcast, and they said, "Hey, we've got this book, we're promoting. Here's the authors." It was The Power of Awe, and it had the two authors. It had Jake and
Michael Amster.
Michael Anderson. And I looked at him, and for whatever reason, I generally just like to have one guest, and I said, "I'd like to have Jake." I got a note back. It was an email that Jake sent back to the publicist, and Jake said, I'm somewhat of a long term and therapist that's a little jaded on therapy, and not sure that Kevin would really want me on the show." And that nailed it for me that I wanted Jake on the show. And we resonated and connected from that point on. But I was curious because at the time I had been involved in a lot of therapy, some pretty intense therapy with couples therapy with my wife. Well, I don't know if we can say it succeeded or failed, but we're divorced. I will say that, and it was some of the hardest stuff that had dealt with at that point, and it pointed to some of what we're about to talk about here. So, Jake, if you want to lead off, the title of the book, Mary, that's the therapy trap: Why We Stay Stuck. That was the title of the blog that Jake published on Sunday, September 21. I think the topic of the book that I'm talking about, where Jake and I got connected, is The Power of Awe. So you can find that on Amazon or whatever. The Power of Awe, a book that I greatly appreciate. All right, Jake, you want to lead us today?
Yeah, I will. I just want to respond to something you said. You said, I don't know if the therapy was successful or not, the couples therapy. And I would say it was not successful, not because you got divorced. Plenty of times people get divorced and it's the right thing and it's just necessary. My concern is when you have two people who love each other, and you and your ex-wife clearly loved each other. When you have two people who love each other and they go through a divorce and they end up either estranged or blaming the other or not relating in a constructive way, particularly when they're kids, then it's not successful. That isn't necessary. If we have what I would consider to be really good therapy, couples therapy, even if we have to get divorced, there's a way to do that that's mature and constructive and respectful and considerate of both parties. And that's really what we're advocating in SAGE. It's not that you always get the outcome you want. You may not get what you want, but you end up feeling comfortable in yourself, and you end up with clear agreements and understandings with other people in your life. So a divorce may just mean people have to recreate their boundaries and their agreements, but people who loved each other, from my point of view, it's real. I really sadden myself when those people end up uh, overly critical or uncaring or reactive. Maybe that's the best word. When those people end up highly reactive to one another, I feel like they've missed an opportunity. So,
And we addressed that with my own journey with Sage and through my divorce. That, and I wanted to say at some point, I remember it, Jake, that, oh my gosh, if I'd only gotten a hold of you and Hannah and the Sage concept long ago, maybe it would have, saved my marriage and it would be happily ever after from this point on. And you said at that point, or maybe you would have separated earlier with far less collateral damage and a
yeah,
lot more amicability, which
yes,
agreed,
yeah,
agreed. And honestly, at this point now, I wonder if that would have been the more likely outcome, that you guys, this is not a good fit. But we can maintain each other's personal agency, not have the stuff that we're going to talk about here, like blame and whatnot,
yeah,
because that was a big part of how I traumatized myself in therapy at the end of blame, and how it was validated by the therapist. And likewise, my blame to my spouse, it was validated. And I look back and think that I do not see how that was helpful.
yeah,
I did
agreed.
not help myself with it.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Well, let's talk about some
blame,
of these.
yeah.
I think there's one, two, three, four, five, six or seven things we're going to touch on briefly. So these are things that I want you to think about. Would you be willing to give these up? Would you want to give these up? Because it is necessary to give these up if you want to live a sage life. You don't have to give them up all at once, and you don't have to do it the first day, but you have to find what Kevin and I are talking about appealing. You have to say, yeah, I'd like to get rid of that. I don't want to live that way. So the first one is blame. When you step into the sage orientation, you're giving up blame completely. There's no place for it. It does not mean that you don't hold people accountable. It does not mean you don't hold yourself accountable, but you do it without blame. And it is possible to communicate with people when you're unhappy or you frustrate yourself without blaming by talking about, for me, by talking about myself. I'm talking about my experience. I talk about how I'm making myself feel. I talk about how I interpret your actions. I don't tell you about you. I'm really using myself as the reference, talking from this place, and it requires no blame. So um, just think if you would find that appealing. Would you like to live your life where you stopped blaming? And hopefully you'll stop being blamed. Now, other people will still blame me from time to time, but I don't take it personally. I just hear them describing how they are creating me in their mind, and they're creating me in their mind in some critical way. But I hear that they're talking about themselves. So I tend not to be very reactive when people are blaming me or critical.
Well, I, in thinking about this, I want to answer it as well. And everybody who's there listening right now, if you're in the chat, feel free. But in this, obviously from my sage orientation now, would I like to be rid of blame? Absolutely. I realize now that that is giving away my personal agency, giving away my power, however you want to state that. Now, in the moment of my life, the moments of my life, the acute issues, when I feel victimized by something, someone in the moment, which is possible. If somebody sticks a fork in my shoulder, I didn't fork myself. I got forked. I'm forked up now, and uh, that's true. That's true. And in that moment, yeah, I want to blame. I am feeling pain, whether it's literal, physical. Now, generally, it's emotional, and I'm paining myself through my perception of somebody. But I am not feeling good. I'm discomforting myself, and I'm really upset at what I feel is the causation. So in that moment, I want blame. I mean, the nature of me wants, wants blame. Now to take it to, let me take it to an exaggerated point, Jake. I did a podcast with a guy a week ago, hasn't been published yet. He's written a book, and he and his wife driving a car, have their two teen kids in the back. Drunk driver comes through an intersection at 90 miles an hour, never sees them, never hits the brakes, hits the back of the car, and kills both kids. This is 6 years ago in real time for this guy. And so, was that person to blame for the death of his kids? Well, yeah, for the most part, yeah. I mean, he can play the game of if I'd been more aware or whatnot, and he talks about that. Maybe I would. But for the most part, yeah, that person is the causation of the death of my children, and he's still struggling. He's actually entering a therapeutic thing right now, 6 years later, where he's going to meet with the lady who actually ran into him, and he's still working through that. So, talk to me about that. About one, just the shallow aspect of, man, I do want blame initially, even though I know big picture it's not going to serve me well, and especially in those acute places where people go. Okay, what about a real, yeah, somebody hit me and now I can't use my leg. How are they not to blame? How can I not blame them?
So let's break this down. First of all, the desire to blame is a defense mechanism. It's a way that we make ourselves feel powerful temporarily. How dare you do that to me? You'll never do that to me again. You're a terrible person. So we blame other people. That's a instinctive reaction
Yeah.
that we experience when we feel really threatened. But the examples you're using, where somebody jams a fork in your arm or somebody drives their car into your vehicle and they hurt or kill someone that you love, those are physical assaults.
True.
And
Yeah.
predominantly what we're talking about are psychological assaults. So, if somebody punches me in the face, it's very different than if somebody calls me an idiot. But the problem I have is that we often react to being called an idiot or having our psychological well being threatened. We often react as if it's a physical assault, which means we go to our fight, flight, freeze reaction. Primitive brain kicks into gear and we react, and we're no longer very conscious and we're no longer very intentional. And we're probably not experiencing a lot of uh, personal empowerment at that point. So I think for the sake of this conversation, it's better if we keep it to psychological injury, psychological insult, psychological assault. And I would reframe all of those by saying, no, the other person is not assaulting me or hurting me psychologically. They're telling me about their experience. Now, as that person tells me about their experience, they may be calling me names and saying nasty things about me. But in fact, they're not talking about me. They're talking about their experience. They're talking about how they interpret it. And if I don't take it personally, I am generally able to listen and witness that and respond in a calm way, which is much more likely to de escalate the dynamic.
What I'm thinking about that, and from those psychological aspects, those things where, yeah, I'm not in physical danger, I'm not being physically harmed, and yet I feel that way. I hear that vernacular with someone when they feel demeaned, when they feel minimized, they feel they didn't get the credit that was due to them, and it may not have any real manifestation. It's just that we're back to identity, and now they blame that person, which you cited in the article with a lady who wasn't really open to hearing about Sage from your friend because she felt wronged by him, and until he apologized, and that was a blame. So she was holding on. She was not willing to partake of this because she was holding a grudge, in essence, on something that had no power, no perceivable power over her other than what she gave it.
Right. But notice how she gave up all of her power because she said, until you do this action, until you apologize to me, I'm going to hurt, I'm going to feel hurt and bad and angry and disappointed. So she is requiring him to do something which is a different category. I put that under the category repair as rescue. And I just made a little cheat sheet here for each of these. So under repair as rescue, which is associated to blame, I said you can no longer wait passively for someone else to fix what you claim they broke. So you ruined me, and I'm going to wait for you to fix me. You have to give that up if you want to live a sage orientation. Because A, I don't have any control over whether somebody else is going to fix me or not. And B, from a sage point of view, they didn't do anything to me. They were just going through life doing their thing. And I may have taken offense or I may have hurt myself, but that's not necessarily their responsibility. That's because of the way I interpreted their actions. So in a healthy dynamic, I would just say to the person, hey, I want you to know what I'm doing. You know, you just said that I'm a jerk. And I just want you to know that I really discourage myself with the idea that you think of me that way. I'm struggling with that. And now that person has an opportunity to clarify. Maybe they'll just repeat the same thing that, yeah, they do think I'm a jerk. But notice that we've moved into what's potentially a constructive conversation instead of me taking my marbles, going home, pouting, feeling hurt, and waiting for them to come and apologize.
And in my experience in that scenario, they don't really think you're a jerk. You did one thing, said one thing in a way that they interpreted poorly or interpreted in a negative way, and now they based all that. I find that over and over and over that it's often just it's one thing. They don't really think that, but it was enough that they just painted over the whole person, and that person is a jerk. And so then when you say, gosh, I discourage myself that you think I'm a jerk, I honestly had this happen in the past few months. I had a friend that was upset about with me about something he had heard from someone else. And when he contacted me with curiosity after he cooled down a little bit, and I gave him my perspective, he apologized. He said, "Man, I didn't really understand, and now I see it makes sense to me. And I'm sorry, I got really angry. It was one thing. He knows me overall. He knows in his perspective that he's not experienced me as a jerk overall, but this one thing was enough to paint it over. And if we hadn't had the opportunity to come together in our agency and have some clarification out of curiosity, it took him a little bit to get to, then that could have fractured the relationship forever."
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So, again, I'm going to ask people listening, are you willing and do you desire giving up this idea of repair as rescue, that the other person has to repair the damage they did to you to rescue you or to rescue the relationship? Are you willing to give that up? And it's fine if you say no.
I do have a response here, though. I do want to say that we just got an aloha in the chat from your co-author, Michael Amster.
Oh, hey, Michael,
Yeah, Michael, if you just got on, you missed it. I
we were
spoke your
talking about,
name in regards to an intro of how I met Jake in talking about therapist, and so you have been mentioned. Thanks for being here, Mary. She says yes, I can relate to the instinctive reflex for the immediate quick fix with blame. If I pause and not take it personally, then I can let go of worrying and stop judging others' intentions. I empower myself.
yeah, there you are, right there. As soon as you make that switch, you find yourself. A word that Kevin likes and has been using a lot lately is you reconnect with yourself. You have self connection
Yeah.
instead of allowing another person to have such an impact on you or to impact yourself so much with the other person that you disconnect from yourself. You confuse yourself. You disorient yourself. That's because of a lack of what we call sagency, which is where I have personal agency. I create my own inner security, and that is the experience of living in sagency, the sage orientation. Okay, let's go to another one of these. This one is called parts, and some of you will be familiar with this, some may not. And what I wrote down was, you can no longer retreat into the excuse of my whatever it is, my 6 year old part, my 10-year-old part, my wounded child. Instead, you remain whole even when you act immaturely. So I want you to think about this one because it's so common in psychotherapy today. There's an entire model built around the idea of parts called internal family systems, developed by Dick Schwartz. So it's really cool stuff. It's very effective. I just think that people sometimes take it too far, which is what happens with a lot of things. So the idea here is that we are made up of parts. And you all probably have experiences where you would say, well, part of me wants to go and part of me doesn't want to go. And it's a convenient way to talk about it. The concern I have is when people start using the parts model as an excuse to justify some of their behavior. So the typical one I see in couples counseling is that the wife will say to her husband, um, the way you spoke to me last night felt really inappropriately. You raised your voice and you threw a pad of paper across the room, and it was very unattractive. And the husband will say, that was my 10-year-old part. That was my wounded boy. Like, that wasn't me. That wasn't the real, authentic me. I would never do that. That was just my wounded child. So, what he's doing is he's sidestepping responsibility for his behavior. And some people may not agree with what I'm about to say, but I don't have a 6 year old in me. I don't have a 10-year old in me. Not anymore. I'm 69. I'll be 70 in a few months. I'm not carrying around a little child. Now, at times I may feel like a child, and at times I may behave like a child. I may be immature, but it's different to say, I'm making myself feel like a child, or I am behaving immaturely, or last night I was behaving immaturely when I threw that pad of paper across the room. Now I'm taking responsibility. I'm not using this model of parts to excuse any of my behaviors. So, again, I really want you to think about this. Do you want to take responsibility for all of your parts and recognize that you are really one person? You come to the day with all of who you are, all aspects of yourself, and you're responsible for all of them. Some of them may feel immature or young or confused. Still, my responsibility to manage myself regardless of how I feel. And that's the part where I think people may resist. I'm still responsible regardless of how I'm making myself feel.
And this one is a big one to me. I grew up in the devout Christian construct where it was the spirit and the flesh working against each other, the good and the evil, these different parts. And then we have, Eckhart Tolle, who I'm a fan of. I've got his books. I resonate with so much, and yet he also showcases the ego and really showcases it often as working against us. We have to really guard ourselves against this ego, this part that's warring against us. It reminded me a lot of my religious construct. Again, I resonated with his concept, but not that framework. And then, as Jake talked about, with Dick Schwartz and IFS, Internal Family Systems. Now, I had Dick on the show. I appreciated it. His book, No Bad Parts, I think it was just last year. I resonated with a lot because he said it's not the bad parts, which was counter to some of my background. They're all good parts. They all have a good purpose and intent. And I like that. And we had, I think, a good discussion about that. And yet it didn't resonate. And so in our work with Sage and looking at it, I helped myself a lot with going, no, I interpret, I have one me. I have one identity. And in this moment, when XYZ happens and I feel a threat, I feel a little bit of insecurity or whatnot, I get to be aware or not. I can be on autopilot and react, or I get to be aware and respond as I want to in a constructive manner and respond maturely. And a lot of my life, I have not done that. Even the concept now of asking myself in my awareness, stop and how would a secure person or how would a secure Kevin respond? And it's so often back to blame. It's not blaming, it's not accusing, it's taking my personal agency, communicating in a way that's subjective where I'm not placing blame or accusation somewhere else. And it's all me, all one part. I'll just say for me, I am able to engage with that much more effectively for my own benefit and behavior than I am with the concept of different parts, which I have not had a lot of experience with people successfully grasping.
I have worked with people using Dick Schwartz's model where they had what's considered to be a multiple personality. And I have used his model to help people integrate where they start to have conversations, one part with another part. And I think in that situation, his model does serve a purpose. Again, it just gets overused. It's become a very common part of our vernacular to talk about, well, part of me this, part of me that, uh, which could be fine if we were taking responsibility for the parts. But when we start to say, oh, almost like, oh, that wasn't me, that was my wounded child. Oh, that wasn't me, that was my 6 year old. That's where I think we are giving away our power and stepping out of the SAGE orientation.
Well, back to your example of the guy in therapy saying, "Oh, I'm sorry, that was the 5-year-old me or the 15-year-old me." I mean, I can relate to that some. I would just retain my agency and say, I'm so sorry. I responded immaturely, much like the 15-year-old part of me that I'm concerned that I have not evolved past that and I want to. And I'm so sorry that you suffered that. That was, but it was me and that was immature.
Yeah, a completely different conversation, right?
Yeah.
That's two people moving toward one another instead of moving away from the other person, but also away from myself. See, when I create a part and I put it over there, I'm disconnecting from myself so that I don't have to take responsibility for my immature behavior or my anxiety or my fears, whatever they may be. I want to encourage all of us to step into ourselves, step into, if you want to use the parts model, step into your parts and own all of them, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so that was we've touched on blame and parts, and we talked about repair as rescue. Another one we have is praise and blame when they're used as control mechanisms, which is really common. And in the SAGE orientation, you no longer depend on other people for validation or condemnation, neither praise nor blame, as proof of your worth. It's not up to other people to determine my worth. That's something that I need to determine. Kevin and I had an interesting conversation about this over the last 24 hours. And one of the things I was saying is that I don't want you to come away from this thinking that validation, even praise, uh, are always bad. I just want you, if you choose to use them, I want you to do it really consciously and deliberately. So when I work with people who are in their teens or 20s, oftentimes they lack a sense of self, they lack a sense of confidence. And so I may look for things that I can validate or even praise without, hopefully, without telling them about them. I do it more by talking about my experience of being with you. My experience of being with you is really, I delight myself because I sense a strength, a quality that I find very attractive. So I don't take away the possibility to support people, to um, validate them if I think it's constructive and appropriate. But I don't do it in a wholesale way because as soon as I praise you and you feel good because I'm praising you, it's as if I'm driving your nervous system. It's as if I have a dial. I turn the dial up and I praise you and you feel good. I turn the dial down and maybe I blame you or I take away the praise and you don't feel good. Which what this means is that you don't have much agency. And I don't want to take away other people's agency. And as soon as I start praising and blaming, that's likely to happen. So we strip away the idea of praise and blame. And if we validate, we do it in a very specific and intentional way. Um, yeah.
And I know validation, we've been talking about it a lot. I like your description of, the internal and the external. And my internal, again, back to self-worth, I feel like that's on me. That's my responsibility. Now, externally, I may want to check the pulse and get a measurement of how I'm coming across because I do care about that. We're not talking about my self-worth, it's intact. So I can with no threat say, gosh, how do you guys experience the podcast? And if they say, yeah, Kevin, I think you're really one of the most immature people I've ever experienced, and you can't get a word out coherently and yada yada. I would like to be able to think, gosh, okay, I'm interested. And if enough people testify to that, I may question what I'm doing and see if I want to hone my craft better or whatnot. But can I take that? And it's not my self worth. It is not the essence, the core of me. And I feel like we're in a culture right now. And if you look at somebody sideways, their core self worth is threatened. And then we have the blow ups that we see daily, whether it's the media or social media.
And you, excuse me, you said if enough people tell me something critical, then I want to pay attention. And I agree with that. But I also would say if anyone that I deeply care about
Fair.
tells me, if Hannah tells me that she doesn't like something about the way I'm behaving or talking or whatever it may be, because I care about her so much, I want to know how she sees me. I want to know what she's doing with me in her mind. And if it's something that's negative or it's something very different than how I want her to see me, I'm going to take that into consideration and very likely I'll adapt my behavior in some way. I do that. I've done the same thing, and I told you this this morning, Kevin. I've done the same thing with mentors. I've had great mentors almost my whole life, and what's been most valuable is when they don't praise me or they don't acknowledge me in a constructive way, because I really value their perspective on the world. And so I'm looking to see if I can get not exactly their approval or their praise, but if I can get a reflection of myself from them that confirms that I'm living my life in a way that I feel good about. Right?
As you were saying that, I mean, you fulfill that role for me a lot when I come up with something or a concept or a thought, and you say, in essence, I'm looking to say, do you resonate with that? Do you connect? And when you say, man, Kevin, I really connect with that, it feels good. I enjoy hearing that for sure. And likewise, when you say, which you do plenty of going, I don't quite connect with that. I would say it that way. I respect you. I'm not threatened and I'm curious and I want to evolve. So I accept that as well. So I like both because I'm really coming to you at this point, not to be validated, but to see, does that connect with you? Because if it does, maybe it connects with others. Maybe it'll connect with the audience out here and whatnot. Uh, I do have a couple questions in the chat if you're good.
I am good. And just let me know if there's a guy mowing in the field. If you get a lot of background noise, then I'll relocate.
Haven't heard. All good.
Great, great.
Um, Mary says, and Mary, I'm going to try to see if I understand this regarding parts. She says, is the question if I'm holding myself accountable to the truth of actions without the story of what part of me might have led me to act a certain way. I don't know if Mary, if you're asking, are we saying discount the story of what happened to your 15-year-old self? I don't think that. We're just saying to frame it. And Jake, let me continue because I think this overlaps what she's asking too. Etienne, he says about the parts, couldn't it be both? That would quote, this was immature. I can track it to my 6-year-old self who was scared of XYZ, but I'm responsible, of course, and want to apologize. Uh, but mentioning the scared 6-year-old.
Yeah, slippery slope, in my opinion, because as soon as I go into the story, for one thing, I'm making stuff up. This whole idea of parts is a metaphor. And Dick Schwartz built an entire therapeutic model around it, but it's all made up. And I don't say that to be critical, not at all. I think it's an effective and interesting model that people have used to help themselves. But as soon as I go into explaining or justifying my poor behavior by telling you what happened to me when I was 6, I feel like I'm digressing and I'm moving away from being present with you in the moment. All I really need to do is say, I disappoint myself when I behave in an immature way like I did last night when I threw that pad of paper across the floor. Uh, I do not want to, I don't ever want to rely on those kind of behaviors when I'm interacting with you. That's really all I need to do. We can then shift into, well, what could I do instead? How do we want to deal with difficult situations in the future? But as soon as I go to that 6-year-old story, that how I was when I was 6 years old, I'm justifying why I'm immature. And I think I am probably giving myself a little bit of an excuse.
That's the word that I just typed down for my own notes, justifying. That's what I find myself desiring to do. And I'm going to say the somewhat insecure part of me. I want to explain, I want to justify. And so in sage orientation, this happens almost daily, folks, for real. Me giving a message to somebody. A lot of times having conversations on sage concepts and owning it for myself and talking about our stories. And I'll get into one and I'll start to explain more and I'll just say, that's all. And it's Jake. I remember talking about this and he referenced himself and Hannah back when they got this original orientation with percept language and said, as they learned it, they realized they just said so much less. And I have experienced that to a great degree as I think about it. And I think about, as we're talking about here, I did something, somebody responded that they didn't like XYZ, like in the therapy session with the couple. And I'm thinking in my head, in my awareness, hopefully, gosh, yeah, that's that. I remember when XYZ happened at 15 years old. I'm bringing that forward. I think that's all for me. It's extraneous for them, but I want to, because I do want to justify, okay, how would secure Kevin respond? And then it's to come back and kind of at the end of what you said to go, I recognize that is an immature response and I'm sorry. All the reasoning behind it, I think the benefit is for me to work through. I don't know that it is beneficial for the person on the other end.
And I think that there are times when we're not in the midst of conflict or tension when we want to talk about what it was like to be 6 years old or what it was like to be 12 years old, an experience I had. That's different. That's a process of curiosity and sharing things about our history. And even when I do that, I want to remind myself and the other person, I don't know, I'm kind of backfilling. I'm kind of making up why I think I tend to be the way I am today based on what happened, but I don't really know if that's true. And that brings us to another one, which is using the
Hey, Jake, before you do that,
yeah.
I just saw what Etienne wrote again. He said, he's talking again about explaining the reasoning, the story behind it. He says, would that not be not always an excuse, but might any understand or empathize? So the temperature or the vibe in the room might be less disorienting. Well, I think that relates to what you just said, and it might depend on what is the temperature in the room. If you're in the therapy session and there's an acute exchange going on, and you're in your story, Jake, your wife is upset about you throwing the paper and having the reaction last night, is she in a warm temperature really wanting to hear the background and the story? You're gonna have to discern that. If I was talking with you, Jake, and Hannah about something I was dealing with, I would say, yeah, the context might matter, and you might be able to help me through that somewhat. But with an acute encounter, is it relevant, or am I using it to justify? Is the other person open to it? So, Etienne, to what you're saying, I could we say, Jake, would you say, yeah, it depends, and you've got to read that
I think
encounter?
context always
Yeah.
matters. I think context is completely underappreciated. We are different in different situations with different people at different times. We need to take all of that into consideration. But as a general rule, when you're learning SAGE, I would say try to give up the justification for why you're behaving the way you're behaving and just take responsibility for the way you're behaving. And then if you want to add something else, you could say, and this is how I would rather behave. This is what I would like to do next time. And to me, that just cleans things up as quickly as we possibly can.
Go
So
ahead. You were
I
about
was
to go to
going
the
to
next one.
I was going to go into the past as an answer, and this is where we dig things up from the past to explain the present, and it's made up. It's made up. Um, what I find is more valuable is to stay in the present and not look for justification, rationalizations, or explanations as to the why I am doing what I'm doing. I had an insight about this recently. I've always referred to myself as having been a very shy child. I think I was. I think that's accurate. But does that explain certain things about who I am today? Maybe, maybe, maybe not. And so instead of relying on that as an explanation for why I am the way I am today, I want to step in more to the question of how would I like to be today? How would I like to conduct myself today? How can I take more responsibility for myself today? These to me are much more productive, constructive questions than looking to the past to find answers, which is what we spend a huge amount of time doing in therapy. And it's not necessarily unproductive, but I don't think it's the most direct route to get where we want to go. And we can spend a long time creating stories about the past.
I mean, with this, and Etienne did reply. He said, "I agree with the slippery slope." I mean, there's so much of these concepts that we're talking about with Sage. My history is to figure these things out and then be conclusive. And that's what we give a title to a book and write it about and become the expert in. I find it so much more difficult to just fully conclude on something as opposed to, Jake, what you just said. It's contextual. It all feels contextual. The rights and wrongs and the blacks and the whites and the goods and the bads and whatever. I just feel like we continue to dig holes and disconnect from each other and ourselves when we have one conclusion that exists over everything. I mean, with this, going into the past, I mean, Jake, we've talked about this so much that we're talking about something that happened in the past, especially let's go to a couples counseling thing, something in the past that first off, we both had different interpretations of, regardless of what actually happened. If there was an objective reality, we had different interpretations, probably immaturely, which is why we're in counseling about it now. Probably if we look back and we're honest, we'd say there were reactions. There was some immaturity involved in that. Now we're however many years later, a month later or 20 years later, and we've changed so drastically. And so often I realize I can't remember half of what we're talking about, but my memory of that interpretation, and we're so convoluted that Jake, what you came to is you habitually then come to in counseling going, what do you need right now? And I appreciate that. And yet what I realize is so often what the other person may want is I want reconciliation of that past hurt that I feel that I'm still hurting myself with. And I've kind of come to now of going, I don't know. That's probably not going to be possible. You're going to have to either be able to get past it or not. I don't know that we can reconcile it because again, we have interpretation upon interpretation on bad memory, on a changed personality. And it feels fairly impossible.
But the reconciliation that I can give you, there are two things. I can say, well, what do you need from me right now in this moment, Kevin? We can't go back and redo what happened 30 years ago. What do you need from me right now? And you might say, I need you to understand what you did to me, that you told me you were going to stick around and you left. You walked away from an arrangement we had. I can acknowledge that that is how you think about it. I can acknowledge that that is your interpretation without agreeing that that's the truth. And people usually feel better when when we say to them, I do understand how you interpret it. Now, if we're both in the S.A.G.E orientation, we don't have to interpret it the same way, and we really can't interpret it the same way. Even if we use the same words, they mean different things to each of us. So I can acknowledge that you want me to know that you feel that I wronged you. I do understand that that's what you're asking for. So does that satisfy you? I don't know. But I am able to go that far and acknowledge that I understand how you experience things. Now, what I always say with couples is that after that happens, don't switch places. Don't say, and let me tell you what it was like for me. Wait a couple of hours or wait a day. In other words, today is Kevin's day. Kevin gets to say what he thinks happened 10 years ago and what it was like for him and what he projected onto me. Okay, I can witness that. Tomorrow, I want to tell you what it was like for me. Different story, different interpretation, different outcome. And this is a very powerful way for people to connect, which is just witnessing. This is very different than agreeing, it's very different than validating. It's simply witnessing. I understand what you're saying to me, I understand the experience that you just described. Person goes, well, do you agree with me? That's different.
I was going to say, do you agree with me, or will you apologize for that interpretation of you that I have? And that's where I just,
Well, what I can say, Kevin, is if that's the interpretation you have or had, it's not the one that I wanted you to have. I am sorry that that is the result. It's not what I wanted, not at all. I have a different story, but just listening to your story, that's not what I wanted.
yeah.
Absolutely not.
Would you put in there the word that comes to mind is that's not what I intended. I hear what you felt. That's surely not what I,
Yeah, and I probably wouldn't do it in the same moment. First, I'd probably just witness you and go, I do understand exactly what you're telling me it was like for you.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and this comes back. I'm back to your context. It does feel so contextual, which the past non sage Kevin did not give enough credit, much credit to context.
Yeah.
I was looking for that blanket statement, that conclusion, that right, wrong, good, bad, black, white again, which I feel like is the culture that we're in, it is a lot easier to stereotype. It is a lot easier to make a judgment than to be curious. I shouldn't say it's easier. It's quick. It can
It's
feel easy in
lazy.
the moment.
Yeah, it's lazier.
It's lazier. Fair. Yeah. It can feel efficient in the moment.
Gregory Bateson was a great anthropologist, and he came up with this line, which was his definition of intelligence was the ability to make finer and finer distinctions. So if you see the world black and white, that's a certain level of intelligence. If you see it in shades of gray, that's a different level of intelligence. If you see the panoply of colors, the rainbow, and even more, that's a much greater degree of intelligence. Your ability to see things with nuance and contextualize them. We don't teach this. We don't talk about this very much in our culture. And I think we're seeing the result of that in this black and white world that we're living in right now. Um, Let me, unless you have another
No, no,
comment.
go ahead.
The last one on the list was called projection as reality. And what I had written here was you can no longer confuse your interpretation of another person with their lived experience. So what that means is that I don't tell you about you because your lived experience is not something I can know. And so we're never really going to argue about what you tell me your lived experience is because I don't know. I can't know. We're just different people. And this is huge in terms of eliminating conflict and tension when I stop telling other people about them. And instead, I'm talking about how I may create them in my mind. In other words, I may have ideas about you in my mind that I'm going to share with you, but I want to be clear. I'm talking about me. I'm talking about, I call it a hallucination. That may be a little extreme, but I hallucinate about other people. I hallucinate what Hannah is thinking when I look at her. I hallucinate whether she's um, enjoying something that we're doing together. But I don't know whether she is or she isn't until I ask her what her experience is. So this is this very, I don't know if you pick up on this during the conversation we're having, but do you sense this separation between people? There's you and there's me. And there's not the fusion and the confusion and the merging that is so common, where people feel like they have the right to tell other people who they are. They have the right to praise you. They have the right to blame you, which is a form of control. Um, we're trying to create some separation. And the word that I like, and I've shared it with Kevin a lot, is the idea of being self contained, that I'm self contained. I care what people think of me, especially people I care about, but it doesn't determine my sense of self. That's something that I'm continuously creating. And there are times where I need more from other people and times where I need less.
Yeah, the projecting, Jake, I tune in now more to someone can do something that I don't appreciate. I frustrate myself with. I irritate with my perception of what you did. The propensity is to say why they did it, to tell
Yeah.
them about themselves. And I remember back in my unawareness of this, but I realized even in my sage unawareness that the other person is citing what my motive is. So I did something they didn't like, but they're telling me what my motive is. And I realized even then, you can't do that because I know what my motive was. I mean, I did it. I did X. I know why I did it. And it sure as hell wasn't that. I actually did it because I meant well. But now I'm seeing how you took it. And I can kind of, oh my gosh, I can kind of see that. But when the person goes, further on in their hurt and shares the motive, man, that's what
Well, you were trying to hurt me because last night I told you I would call you. I didn't call you, and now you're just trying to get back at me.
yeah, you were being mean and malicious and you're trying to demean me because that's and boy, we have the chance of connection at that point is probably uh 0%. Yeah, you're at the point of we need to walk away, and we'll come back in an hour or a day to this because we're off. We're back to reading the temperature and seeing where the respect is. But when we say the person's motive, so on our spot, when we feel we hurt ourselves with something, somebody did something, maybe it crossed a boundary that we're aware of for ourselves. We do not like that, but to come and say, "Look, I experienced this, what happened this way, and I'm struggling with it." Uh, but do not say why the person did it because we do not know. Back to your projecting, we do not know. We cannot tell them about them. They can tell. We can ask and get to be curious. Go, why did you do X?
And I'll go one step further. Not only do we not tell them what their motive was, but we don't even tell them what they did.
Just how I felt.
Just what I
What?
did to myself.
Huh?
I think I can't remember if it was you and I that had this conversation recently, but it may have been somebody I was responding to, but I was trying to draw a distinction where you take away the causality. So instead of saying to you, um, I'm hurt because you blank, I hurt myself because you blank, which is stepping into sage, better to just say, um, to take the you out of it. I hurt myself when I perceive other people not listening to me. So there's no causality. I'm not putting anything on you. I'm just simply telling you about me. And again, if you care about me and we're in relationship, the chances are good that you're going to be interested, you're going to care, you're going to want to understand. So as long as I don't put any of this on you, we have a good chance of making a lot of headway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I thought you were going to say this is a discussion we have because I wrote it down and really appreciate it. You and I were talking about it. It's actually an interaction that I had with one of my kids that I was sharing with
Oh,
you.
right, right,
Yeah. And you
right.
said, okay, instead of what we normally do, so we've got something that we are going to address with someone that we didn't like, we frustrated ourselves with. And we're going to sage ourselves, realize we're the ones doing it. So we're going forward. And the concept that even we have talked about is to say, look, this is what I perceive happen. I frustrate myself with this. And you said, and I'll paraphrase a bit. We often talk about what we got that we did not want, and that's what we're trying to share, or what we didn't get that we wanted. How about instead? I love this, Jake. Instead, just coming forth and saying, "Here's what I would like," and this is a very non-acute issue, but I have a grandson that's living with us that we share. He and I share a bathroom, and I went in there and I saw some things that I didn't like. I didn't want it to be that way. And instead of going in and saying, "Look, you did this. I don't like that. Do it this way. And here's what you're not doing. I wish you do." I just said, "Hey, bud, here's what I would like. We're sharing this bathroom, and I would really like this to be my towel and this to be my soap. I would like you to have these spots to do with whatever you want to." And he looked around and said, "Okay." That was it. I didn't even have to tell him I was frustrating myself. I thought it was brilliant. Now, I don't know if that's going to wash over everything, but for me, that's going to be my first go to with anything that I frustrate myself with is can I come to this with a, hey, here's what I would like. And you may still have to at some point get to the, okay, this is what is happening that I would like to change. But I'm wondering how often I can not even get into that by just simply stating, hey, here's the environment. Here's what I would like in this scenario, and see how often that takes care of it. And it was to me just it's beautiful, and I walked it out.
Right, right. I remember it now. Yeah, it
Yeah,
was really, really sweet. Yeah. So for those of you listening, and we're talking about these things that we're saying that these are illusions, and when you step into sage, you strip them away. This is another one. Are you willing to give up the illusion whereby you justify your feelings by pointing out to the other person what they did, and instead just simply ask for what you want? And I find this to be both really elegant when I use this with Hannah. And I also intrigue myself at the times where I don't want to do this. I don't want to say, here's what I want. Somehow I want to first say, here's what was wrong. Here's what I didn't like. Here's what I never want to have happen again. I want, there's a unhealthy kind of power that comes from doing that. And really, what I'm doing is I'm making her wrong. That's really what I'm doing. And I'm inflating myself by making her wrong. Incredibly unproductive, unhelpful, disrespectful, in my opinion, and never gets me where I want to go.
Well, I'm thinking to just come forward and say, this is what I would like, it feels like an aspect of vulnerability, because you could reject that or whatnot. If I come first with what you did wrong, I'm gaining a little leverage. I'm looking for a little leverage on you
Yeah.
as opposed to that. I agree. It was, even in my little example, it was a grappling with, I think, what you're saying. And I'm back to the, what would I do if I was secure? And as you talk about all of these and I'm thinking through it, it just feels like these illusions that we're talking about here that you listed out, Jake, and blogged about. These are illusions that I experience threaten connection, as opposed to all that we're talking about with Sage, these different structures, this different operating system, OS3, I find they raise the opportunity of connection dramatically in my experience.
Yeah.
And that's what I want. I want connection with myself, and generally then with another person, or even with my surroundings, with the circumstances that I may not have control over. I want to connect. And we seem to be in a world, an unsage OS2 world, that is continually disconnecting.
Yeah, you use connection. I like that. And it makes me think of being conscious. I want to have a conscious relationship with myself, within
Yeah.
my environment, with the people in my life. It's a different quality of connection when I'm conscious.
Yeah, which I can't do and be lazy, as you pointed out a minute ago. Mary says, she said, Kevin, the example of sharing a bathroom with a grandson was helpful. Rather than forcing selfish boundaries, you simply said, hey, how about I hang my towel here and you set your stuff over here? And then she said, yeah, raise the opportunity for connections without controlling. That is, I mean, I share a home with a 16-year-old, 15-year-old, 13-year-old, and a 12-year-old. And that opportunity to connect or disconnect, they're at that age right now, I feel is fairly tenuous. So I'm watching it and walking this stuff out. And I am watching the connection with my kids increase every single day. I blow my mind with it as I watch it, because I feel like I am doing and impressing myself on them less than ever.
Right.
And
And
I'm
probably having
connecting.
more influence and more connection, right?
Say it again.
Probably having more influence and more connection.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's weird, but it is not, I am not able to be lazy with it
Yeah.
at all, which is why
I,
we're having discussions about it.
yeah. I have a quick question for people listening. Two questions. The first one is, what, on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being 100%, I get it. Where are you with what Kevin and I are talking about today? Do you understand the idea of giving up what we're referring to as illusions? Blame, repairing each other, validating, projection, using our past as a way to figure out where we are. To what degree do you really feel like you're getting this? I comprehend it. I get it. 5 is 100%, and a 1 means I have no idea what you guys are talking about. I'm just curious. And if you put that in the chat, uh,
I'm looking. Etienne said a 5,
okay.
which I'm grateful for. I will take that constructively, not as praise. How's that? But it is little. This is back to the validation aspect that I can feel. Ralph says a 5. Um, we can feel solid in this. Judy says a 5 as well, and Mary. Thank you guys. But that matters. There's the validation. I don't think that Jake and I and Hannah are going to be threatened by this. I'm living this. I'm living Sage. It is, I have greatly altered my life for the better. I'm testifying it here. My connection with my kids and with the world at large, my level of peace and inner security. Nobody can threaten that. So if everybody said a 1, you're not going to threaten the core, but we may consider how we're communicating it. We may
Yeah,
consider
I would.
the good.
Yeah, I would blame that on you.
Well, that's fair. It's my fault. Yeah. It's definitely not Hannah. I'm going to put you in the middle and I'm down at the bottom. Uh, Mary said the projection is hard. the projection aspect. And well, here I'll just keep reading them. Lolly still feels so wonky. She gets it, but it's challenging to put into practice. Etienne says, I'm helping myself with this tremendously. Mary says that getting it is one thing, but living it well is probably at a 3. Lolly and Mary, thank you for saying that. I think I shared this, Jake, with you. We've mentioned I have a daughter who's really saging herself, but she will, in a conversation, pause like this and sometimes bumble over her words as she tries to say it sagely, tries to say something subjectively, because in her head, she's reorienting what she actually thinks and believes. And that is not an efficient aspect. So I feel like it's learning a new dance, or well, back to a new language. It is a new language. If I'm going to go learn Mandarin, anything that I say, I'm going to have to stop, think about, translate, because they say it in a totally different manner than that. And that's what I'm doing. And I think I would testify that if we took recordings of my messages to you, Jake and Hannah, especially when I get on a roll and start talking like this fast, that I would fall out of sage orientation. I would guess that I do that less now because it's more ingrained. So, like anything, this is a practice that is not just a mechanical how we speak, but how we think. And as my personal agency increases and all my illusions that we're talking about are going by the wayside, it does become more natural. And I find that I can integrate it into any conversation, even somebody who is not remotely sage, and they usually just don't get it. And the ones that do, I can see it maybe subconsciously register. And the ones that I know close, it literally registers. But I just want to let's see. Do I want to validate? I got to think about that. I resonate. Back to that. I resonate with it being kind of wonky initially.
Yeah.
It, yeah.
The only thing I'll say about that is that if you think of it as an orientation, a way of going through life, a way of going through your day, I think that's easier than thinking about it mechanically. This is a way I'm going to go through my day. I don't know anything about other people other than my own hallucinations. I'm going to be very careful what I tell other people about them. I'm really not going to tell other people about them. I'm going to talk about myself, my experience, recognize that it may be different than theirs, probably is. Not going to use praise and blame. So it's an orientation. All of these things go together. And I guess the last question I would leave you all with, and you don't need to answer it now, is do you want to give up these illusions? And it's very important that you be honest with yourself if the answer is no on some of these. You may go, no, I'm not giving up. I'm not giving up talking about my past because I think it really helps me explain who I am today. Just be honest with yourself if you're willing to give these up. And if there's one you're not willing to give up, um, there's something going on there. There's some way that you're using that to protect yourself or make yourself feel safer. So I would just encourage you to look at it.
Yeah, I know we're over our time, and yet everybody has stuck with us. And you've got a couple questions, Jake. You good with hitting a couple things real
Sure.
quick? Okay, we'll keep rolling with it. The aspect of you said, if you don't agree and say no, or what I was going to say, or you say, gosh, I kind of get it, but I don't know how to do it. I don't know how to walk that. I think that's part of, as you said, part of the orientation. And I'm reading your feedback. Sue says, she says, Sue, a 5, but then I'm not sure the name, AIM, but he said 2.5. He says it's kind of makes sense, but he can't explain it. Debbie says, I get it as a 5 and am working towards the 5 from a 3.5 to a 4. And Judy says, yes, exclamation point. But to Debbie and Sue, I have literally said to Jake and to other people as well that there are aspects of not only of Sage, but of other things that I am immersing myself in and researching. I'm reading a new book by Ram Dass, or from his teachings. He's on the live, but a new book that is coming out in October. And I'm looking at it, and there's some things in there along with Sage where I'm going, I get it intellectually. I connect. It makes sense to me in my head. Again, intellectually. My heart is not quite there yet. My habits aren't quite there. My emotions, my internal programming. We're back to why we called this an operating system. I have been living under the operating system of what we call OS2 for so long. So now I'm reading and getting an idea of OS3, and there's some of them totally makes sense. I don't even know how to refute it. But oh my goodness, I'm still uploading into that, for lack of better terms. I'm still uploading. So it's gonna I'm getting there little by little. And there are some aspects that are probably further behind than others.
Yeah, and this is where at some point, I don't know when it'll be in the next few weeks, at some point, we're going to go to Zoom calls where there's an opportunity for people to share, come on the screen. We'll
Yeah.
get to work with you a little bit. We'll go into breakout rooms. You get to practice with other people. We just haven't gotten to the point where we're ready to do that. We need to have enough people, for one thing, to make it feel dynamic and viable. So that will happen. But for the time being, we're sticking with this
Yeah.
format.
Well, thank you. There's actually the number, it just increased again of how many people are watching. So, but thank you. Thank you guys for being here. I think our intent is to be here next Tuesday. I'm not sure the date, maybe 9, 10, but the 30th, maybe. I'm not sure, but assuming you're all here because you're on Jake's list. Oh, Sue said Arnie. Okay, thanks. But thank you guys for being here. And I'm really, I feel confirmed to see, when we get a group of people on, that everybody stays here for what now is, an hour 10, that you stay engaged, and appreciate the feedback. And yet, to what Jake said, we are really eager to have a place where folks can engage and work this out, to take the things, Mary, like you said, and take, that you're having a hard time. You get it intellectually, but the projection aspect is difficult to walk out, and to take that case by case, which I had the privilege of doing. I've been doing that with Jake and Hannah for maybe coming up on 2 years here before long. And to offer that opportunity to walk with you guys and provide guidance. All right, they're still in the chat. Thanks for being there, Jake. Always a
Yeah,
gift.
thank you all. And if you have other people, friends, or partners who are interested in this,
Yeah.
we only invite people to come to the Tuesday call if they downloaded the blueprint. So there's a lot of people on our list, but they haven't downloaded the blueprint. We don't invite them to come because we feel like they haven't got the basic foundation. So if you know people who are interested, encourage them to download the blueprint, and then we'll invite them to these Tuesday calls.
All right, Ralph says all of life is an experiment. The more experiments, the better. By Emerson. Thanks for that. We'll cap on that. Thanks,
All right.
everybody.
Aloha.